Welcome to the Eschatology Podcast, brought to you by Resonix. Visit ResonixSoundSolutions.com for the best ways to free your car, motorcycle, house, or spaceship from resonance with Resonix. And many thanks to Resonix for making this podcast a reality.
Today we are here with Mr. Dan Merritt. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Clifton. What's going on, buddy?
And Todd Luliak. Hello, Todd.
Hey, Cliff.
So I've got to know Dan really well over the past few years since we did Lone Star together and a couple other things, and I think we've become friends and cohorts and some of this stuff. But actually, I've known Todd for quite a bit longer, as far as years ago. I think the first time I really got to sit down with Todd was it 2013 finals?
Sounds like about right, yeah.
Yeah, I think in
2012, 13.
Yeah, Birmingham, was it, I think?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, or not Birmingham, it was the other Alabama finals. Anyway, you had the GTI at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to demo that with Todd, and that was an experience all the way around. I mean, it was, I think you were one of the few people that were doing it was open to the outside, basically 15 infinite baffle sub in there, didn't you? Something like that?
Yeah, it was FII B18 in the back.
18.
Infinite baffle, and then a fully infinite baffle front stage.
Yeah, and it was one of the few cars that was doing that, if maybe one of the only cars doing that at the time. And not only that, but Todd's presentation of the vehicle during the demo was very informative, more so than I think anyone else was doing. And I think it actually changed the way a lot of us started doing demos to a certain degree, just because you really put in front of the listener, not just here's a car and here's some music and isn't that cool? Okay. You really brought an educational component to it. Like, here's what you're going to hear. Here's why you're hearing it. Here's what I did to get there. Like, there was a lot more, I think, that you put into it. And it seems like what I've known of you and the things that you've done, you bring that same kind of, that level of next levelness to things. That's very much appreciated. Obviously, we haven't had either of you on the podcast, so maybe let's start with Dan. Dan, what's your background in car audio? How long you been in it? I mean, I guess it's been more than a few years, right? What got you into competition in the first place?
So I won't spend the entire hour explaining all this, but so I grew up in the Midwest, and I was basically the king of Kansas City, basically at one point, with a Mustang GT Coupe, basically, or a hatchback, I should say, and had a full Alpine system in it. This is, I'm 17, 18 years old. Went to college, got out of college. My parents had moved to Houston. And this is the late 80s, early 90s, right? Mm-hmm. And, if you know anything about Thunder on Wheels, so, I'd been to a few shows basically in the Midwest, but when I went down to Houston and I stumbled upon this shop called CJ Sounds, I was shocked. All of a sudden it's like, here I thought I was doing something with my multiple 2-channel Alpine amps and a couple of the flat piston 12s of the Alpine flat, in a huge box, and then I roll in and I see the Cheetah van with 2015s, mm-hmm. and just oh my God! And then the guy that I was dealing with in Houston basically was tied in with a certain individual basically out of Bridge City, Texas, mm-hmm. Named Fukuda. Mm-hmm. And so I got a chance to basically go back and forth and see what those guys were doing on both ends of the spectrum. And it's crazy. I look back now and some of the things I've been exposed to over the last 20, 30 years, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was exposed and around greatness.
Yeah.
We'll start with Mark, and then I was on the Rockford competition team, Team Cobra. Then I went to the kicker competition group. I was around Mark Eldridge from the first iterations of the Forerunner all the way, through all the stages, and still a lot of these guys, I still have them where I can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, can you help me with this? What do you think about this? And even with the kick competition group with Alma's Blazer, Alma's Bronco, I was involved in that a little bit too. So it's just all these moments in time that you don't really think about. And then you look back and you're like, damn, someone starts talking about it, and I just kind of chuckle to myself. Yeah, I was there. And awesome. So I've done everything from won multiple SQ World Championships and in various formats in the 2000s and the 90s, as well as SVO World Championships, world record holder in multiple times, in different classes. So I've been around the block a little bit. I'm old now. I don't think I'm old till I look in the mirror or till when I get up in the morning.
I think we all feel that a little bit now these days.
Yeah.
Too true.
How do you think the competition scene, obviously sound quality scene in particular, since we're focused on that, but how do you think the competition scene has changed from those days when you came into it to what it is now?
So I stepped away for a little while, and then I got bored. And I was looking for something to do. I'm like, yeah, I used to have a good time doing that, running around and traveling and tweaking with cars. And so I got out of it. And then, so the last show I had been to from an SQ install standpoint was the 95 IASCA finals in Greenville, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Now, keep in mind, at that show, there were 500 entries.
Right.
And that's where you're doing full on, basically, install, RTA, SQ, SPL, right. And so, I came back and I went to a couple of shows, and, I was, listening to people's cars, trying to figure out what people were doing and trying to wrap my head around the nuances and the difference. And I don't remember who it was now, but somebody made a comment to me. You're like, having a conversation. I was like, hey, why don't you do this that way? Why are you doing it that way? And they're like, what do you know, old man? Oh. and Cliff, you know me well enough.
that ain't gonna fly.
That's just a source of motivation for me.
Right.
I'm like,
I'm not gonna get bad. I'm just gonna get even.
right, exactly. If you doubt me, I'm just gonna basically find a way. And so then basically I partnered up with a shop in the Dallas area, and we put 14 months later we rolled this car, and everybody was like, "What the hell is that?" And it was had very much of a 90s flavor, motorized amp rack and kick panels and got very loud, and it kind of a Swiss Army knife. So the first year we went to finals, we roll up to finals, and I'm expecting what I had seen in 95 at in Greenville, South Carolina. And I was like, we roll in there. I'm like, well, where are all the cars at?
Yeah. So this parking lot's nice. Now, where's the show at?
Yeah, where's all the trailers? Where's all the pole rigs? Where's all the cars? I was kind of shocked a little bit about it, and didn't realize that it had fallen off a little bit. But I think that since this is going back 7 or 8 years, it since has picked up, especially with what we call the bonus round shows, or the money round shows, as they like to call them. But I think the detail in the installs, for the most part, overall, is not there like it was back in the day. But I think that the workmanship that's being done, the materials that are available and the tools that are available, it can be done very easily if somebody wants to. But people are more focused on the sound. And I will say that I don't care what anybody says, the 2-seat cars back in that era would get their ass handed to them by an amateur class 1-seat car now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't care what you say. I'm fully 100% committed. The technology, the speakers, the amplifiers, everything that we have available to us now basically is just the measurement tools, the tuning tools, the DSPs. It's such more advanced than it was back then.
Well, I think it's easy to use your hearing memory, which is terrible. We can barely
Correct.
remember what we heard this morning very well, much less 30 years ago. But
Right.
I think to say that sound quality, that the cars back then would be objectively comparative to the way we judge cars today, because I think the way we judge the cars has evolved over time itself. But it'd be the same as saying that the cars back then that were not purpose built, that were a general purpose, all function car audio vehicle doing all those things. And it's cool that they did all those things. But saying that is, I think, the same as saying that the vehicles back then were just as loud as the SPL vehicles we have now. And that's also simply not true.
That's correct. That has lots to do with the technology. And same thing in the SQ world. Now, could a one-seat SQ amateur car basically take on a pro car in a full contest where they're doing two-seat sound, install, RTA, SPL, all that? No. But we're just talking about the sound aspect of it.
Correct.
It's a lot easier to make a car sound good in one seat than it is two seats, unless you have the proper gear. And
Sure.
we'll let Mr. Luliak talk about that here in a little bit. You see how I segued into that?
Yeah, right. Well, first, before we get there, I'll have to interrupt your smooth transition. Todd, what about you? What got you into car audio?
I missed most of what Dan just said in car audio. To me, car audio at that time was, magazines,
Right.
and the install, the pageantry, the everything around that, and the envy of what you saw in those magazines. It wasn't until really almost to the time you and I met that I got hooked up with hybrid audio, got myself on DIYMA, and started really looking into it. That car audio became a thing beyond just making an install happen in a car for me.
Right.
And the first show I went to was more than eye-opening. I had no idea what sound quality really was. And so that began a long education for me as to both what the goal was and how to achieve it. And, like Dan said, over the last 10 years for certain, the amount of knowledge, the tools, everything about car audio has just exploded with what we're capable of doing. And it really has been cool to watch.
Very recent interview, we discussed the same thing, but how the learning curve has shortened so much from even the time that you came in, Todd, and especially from the time that Dan was first involved. But the amount of secrets that are left are very few and far between, and probably the people who say there are secrets at this point are maybe making them up because I feel like
Right.
it's all out there if you dig through it, and obviously you have to experiment for yourself and do it in your own vehicle. But I think that getting to that point, it took me for a long time to get in my head what people were talking about when they talked about phase. And then when it finally clicked, and then I was able to process that. But now it's kind of like you can pull out the analyzer and be like, here, see this? I do this, and then I do that, and see how the squiggly lines move? There's your phase. It's like, oh, okay, that's cool. You can, there's so many shortcuts now. And I don't mean shortcuts, but, there's things have evolved to the point now where, again, that learning curve has shortened so much that people can get to a very good place very quickly if they apply themselves and get with the right people. But
no question, yeah.
It's that part. I think both of you are echoing that's been fun. Now you kind of obviously fell out of car audio as far as your involvement on the scene has gone, and we'll have a feeling we have a little bit of discussion on it, so let's go ahead and jump into it. What have you been developing in the meantime?
Yeah, well, competition for me wasn't really me being competitive against other people. It was me being competitive against myself. And so competition for me was an opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I deeply credit my regular judge, Jeremy Klutz, here in Oklahoma, Texas area, for giving me that education through, that iterative process of going to competitions and getting feedback. Because you mentioned audio memory. That man's audio memory is simply incredible.
Mm-hmm.
From show to show, he could tell me, you changed this frequency half a dB. I'm like, how could you possibly know that? And so I did fall out of the competitive aspect, but not the learning aspect.
Right.
And in the time that I spent competing, talking to competitors, especially the older competitors, about the glory days of two-seat, and experiencing Mark's car in two-seat mode, and working with him on tuning that, and learning more about what he did and how he did it and why it was done, really pushed me to want to know more about that. And that started very close to the beginning of my introduction to car audio, was this idea of two-seat cars, and trying to understand how we might find a way to bring that back, so that while I'm giving a demo over there in the right seat, I'm not listening to the bad seat while I'm showing off the good one, right?
Everything's shoved into the pillar, and
right. And I mean, it was always enjoyable to give demos and watch people see what they heard in front of them, right? To paint that picture for them and to give them an experience during the demo. But I never got to enjoy it. I was over here talking about what they were hearing and not what I was hearing.
And trying to avoid what you're hearing during the whole time, yeah.
Right, yeah. So after a while, once I was past my competitive phase and enjoying the car that I had, I really started digging into the concept of upmixing and how you can use a center channel to anchor an image to create two seats that give you a symmetrical listening experience, right? Mm-hmm. Because this picture had been painted to me by all of the people who had been competing for many years and were part of that original, two-seat thing, that, it was so much better and so challenging and difficult to overcome the acoustics of the car, to try to provide something similar to that presentation. Mm-hmm. And certainly the acoustics of the cars haven't changed in a way that lends themselves to that any more than anything else has. Right. So I challenged myself to try to find a way around that, and spent a lot of time listening to other manufacturers, upmixers, and time after time I came back to, these are great surround experiences, but it's not stereo. This isn't what I'm in the car to listen to, right? What I really like about stereo is the way that it can provide me the expansive space in front of me to paint a precise, focused picture of instruments and people, and there's space in between the instruments and people, and there are people in front of other people. There's depth to the stage, there's width, there's an expansive holographic image in front of me. And I didn't get that with other upmixers. I would sit down and listen to music, and it provided me a very flat but surrounding experience. And that just wasn't what I was after. And so I challenged myself to learn what I needed to learn to try my hand at that. To try to develop something that provided me a stereo perspective, something that felt like stereo and that presented itself like stereo, but that didn't lock me into one seat. And thus began a very long journey.
It sounds like, as far as your goals here, you're kind of contrasting having control over, and I'm going to use a term that is in direct opposition to kind of what you're probably trying to accomplish, but you're essentially trying to control the phantom center image of a stereo presentation versus creating a multi-channel experience where this information comes from the center, and then a little bit of information comes from left and right, and some information comes from the back, kind of more like your typical, because it feels like the typical upmixer is more doing kind of what our Dolby Logic surround processors were doing in 1987. You know what I mean? Like, it's not...
They suck.
Yeah. Whereas,
Well, they provide a very different experience, right? We're
right.
from a car audio perspective. Our goal is being in the center, the sweet spot of a stereo system,
Mhm.
right? So that you gain all of what stereo gives you, despite the fact that you're not actually in the center in a car environment, which is acoustically problematic, as we all know. And to recreate that as much as we can, and even better, if possible, to recreate the event that led to that recording, right? To create that level of realism. And so that was the challenge I was looking to solve, not the surround challenge. I think there are plenty of surround up mixers on the market that do a really good job of what their goal is. But my goal was different. It wasn't to surround myself with misplaced audio, right? I wanted that 2-channel experience, but I wanted to be free to move around in my space, in my environment, and still experience that, to still have the width and the depth and the positional location of everything within the environment. And so I went about things much differently. Yeah.
So let me touch on something about what he just said, and something that I've observed, because I've got one in my car, and in the traditional one seat tune, a lot of the tunes in these cars, basically, you have to be, you're always worried about sitting the judge correctly and measuring to a certain point, getting the judge seated correctly, and if you move your head too much, it's going to screw up the imaging and the staging. Correct?
Yes.
When that thing is turned on, you can move around as much as you want, and it doesn't affect basically the staging or the imaging. Which is the first time I've picked up on that, I was like, what is this black magic? What is this looking voodoo going on here?
Which I assume is because you're not having to rely on the specific left-right delay to create that phantom center image being in exactly the right spot, right? I mean, you're not moving that distance differential around based on where your head moves as much, because you're counting on having that control from the center.
Well, yes, to some degree. And I think the word that you used, rely on, is important here. We don't rely on it, but it does matter, right? Path length distances still matter. The rate at which sound falls off through air still matters. The physics still matters. But we significantly tilt things in our favor when we take that single stereo triangle, we split it in half and create 2 stereo triangles instead. Because now the path lengths of concern have changed geometrically.
Right.
Okay, so you have a physical speaker at far left, at center, and far right, which means center is no longer phantom. That infers then that the information from center has been removed from the sides and is no longer, the path lengths from far left to far right are no longer of the same concern that they once were. All right. The phantom image has been moved from center to left of center and right of center. So the left speaker and the center speaker create a phantom left of center. In most cars, from the listening position, it can be achieved that the left speaker and the center speaker are roughly the same distance from the left seat listener. And when that happens, the left of center image appears at almost exactly the space that you would expect it to without adding any time differentials. Similarly, the path length distance for the left seat listener between the center and far right speaker are much closer together than they used to be when it was the left speaker and the right speaker. And so the right of center image appears at a more correct location as well. I know there was a whole lot of...
Your left of center and right of center become your phantom image, which are also happen to be right in front of the listener. So you're effectively cutting down on your path length differential by adding that speaker.
In a lot of ways, yes. And this is true of all up mixers. But what isn't true is that they don't intend to create the same stereo presence that we're looking for. Or that I'm looking for anyway. I originally developed this thing for me. I never expected that it would even work, quite honestly. I don't have, when I started this project for myself, I didn't have any of the information necessary to succeed. I didn't have an electronics background. I don't have programming background. I am not a mathematician. And so in order to end up at this result, I had to teach myself each of these disciplines well enough to be able to answer the question, how do I get there?
So I don't know anything about it other than there are people that have them in their vehicles and everything else. So I mean, I'm here to play dumb observer because I am dumb observer. But to break down what I feel like is happening to a certain degree is your typical up mixer is putting more information in that center and letting the differential kind of fall off the edges to the left and right. Whereas it sounds like you're looking for a more uniform presentation of left, center, right. Is that correct-ish?
Absolutely. Far left should have exactly the same amplitude and location that far left always has in your one-seat vehicle. Far right should have exactly the same presentation that you should expect in a one-seat vehicle. And center should give you a physical speaker providing the same sense of a phantom center that you expect in a one-seat vehicle. The difference is it doesn't matter which one seat you choose.
Mm-hmm. and you're not compressing the width of the stage to get there, which is essentially what you're doing with a lot of the other up mixers.
Yeah, that was the big challenge we had with the previous version of my car was, you know, I had a center channel in there, and we were doing some mixed mono and some right left differential adjustments and whatnot, and try to get it to work right. And it worked okay, but literally 20 minutes after plugging Todd's processor in, the 2-seat from either seat was probably within 80% of the 1-seat tune that we had just spent 4 hours working on.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. And the imaging is locked and loaded basically everywhere you want it to be. I didn't use it at finals because there were some things that we had not worked out, and I didn't think it was fair to represent his product without it being locked and loaded, if you will. But it is now. And the interesting thing was I had heard a rumor of Todd's project, basically, and so I reached out to him when we were rebuilding the car, because knowing what the new rules were going to be down the road, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a competitive advantage where I can get it. And so I started talking to Todd about, hey, this is what we're doing, and he goes, oh, that's perfect for what this thing does. Let me get one in your hands. And so we worked out a deal, and you know, the first time we plugged it up, it was like, oh, and you know, Jeffrey Hall basically is, you know, I think we were probably the first one other than Mark to actually have one and fire it up in a car, and immediately it was shocking, you know. And Jeffrey has since tuned a couple cars with it, and he's got it, you know, between him communicating with Todd and experimenting with it. Basically, I think he's got it locked in where he can tune one pretty quick now and get it sorted out. Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable the first time you hear it. You'll be scratching your head.
I guess we've kind of assumed or overlooked the fact of what is the name of the product?
Yeah, the product is an SRP, a soundscape reprojection processor. I went with that name because it's not up mixer, and we've had a lot of up mixers in car audio that have left a really bad taste in people's mouths. And this is very, very different from anything anybody has ever experienced with a car audio up mixer before. So I wanted to give it a name that was representative of what it did. The company's name is Riven Audio. Riven means torn apart, ripped asunder, right? And that speaks a lot to the process that I go through in the upmixing process, the weeding out of what should go where in order to distribute the energy to the appropriate speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Riven Audio SRP is what we're talking about.
In this process, I think, and I guess one of the things that fascinates me about anything around this is as much the process and getting there as it was the actual results. But being that I've been involved in, car audio brands and manufacturing for a long time, it's difficult enough to, let's say amplifiers for an example, right? Like there's not a whole lot of, yes, there's varying things that go in to certain things, but the typical amplifier that goes out is a reshelled something. You're doing so many channels at so many watts, target frequency response, target distortion rates, blah, 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 a couple features, slap a badge on it, do some industrial design, and voila. Just that process is difficult enough, even if you already have the wheel, to do it. The challenges that you kind of threw out there that you had in, one, you're not a car audio manufacturer by trade.
No.
Doesn't sound like you had any of the background or credentials to go, oh yeah, I'll flip a switch and do this. I'm sure there were many, but I guess two questions there. What was your biggest hurdle during that maybe that you didn't expect? Because obviously you knew that you had overcome some things, but what was the biggest hurdle that you maybe didn't expect during that process, and what went smoother than expected?
Yeah. The development of this product in every respect has been an exercise in failure.
That's how you learn.
Yep. Yeah, no, and truly, this exists through nothing but tenacity and sheer will. Mm-hmm. The entire process was trying something, failing at it, learning from that failure, and trying something else. Mm-hmm. In the math, in the software, in the development of the hardware that is out right now, the board says it is a Gen 7. That is mostly true. It's really about Gen 9 or 10 of iterations of hardware in getting it as good as I wanted it to be and learning what was necessary to achieve that. The design and development of the electronics was an interesting hurdle, but transitioning a design to manufacturing was shockingly more difficult than I ever expected, and has led to me having them manufactured here in the US, because at the time that I was working on that, we were just coming through COVID. And as you very well know, getting things from overseas to the US and back was very challenging at the time.
Right.
And so, yeah, all of the design and development was done in-house by me. The industrial design all the way down to the smallest detail of the electronics and software. And when I started it, it was a challenge that I posed to myself that I truly never expected I would solve. Wow. I thought it was the hardest problem that I could imagine. And I said, oh, what the heck? Why not? And so to have gotten here and the product be as good at what it does as it is just, it's so much more than I could have possibly asked for. Somebody getting into and out of one of the cars that's running the processor for the first time, seeing someone like Matt Mergenthal get in, demo it, and get out giddy like a kid at what he just experienced. That right there is so awesome for me to be able to share that and be able to share it, more broadly than just the one I have in my car being demoed for people. So yeah, I don't think I could narrow it down to just one challenge.
It sounds like the entire thing was more difficult than expected, and also the fact that it got to this point of completion is also unexpected, right?
Yeah, no, it really is. I truly, when I started this, I never ever expected to be here. Mm-hmm. The thing that has gone the smoothest is people's openness to it, despite how many bad upmixers or upmixers in the past that they had experienced that didn't meet their expectations. people are extraordinarily more open to the idea that something new might not be bad, and that has really surprised me. So I've spent a lot of time answering a lot of emails. How is this different? And it's really challenging for me to be able to answer that concisely, because I can't explain to someone over an email what they're going to hear when they fire it up, right? And it's not like anything else that I can point to that says it's like this, because it just isn't.
In terms of system design, let's say I'm Dan's old car and I've got a whatever XYZ up mixer in there, and I've thrown a speaker in the center position of whatever car, and I come to you and I say, I want to do what you're doing. And maybe limitations isn't quite the right word, but what changes, what differences might I expect in terms of system design with using your product versus if I'm already using an upmixer, or just a typical everyday throw a center channel in, throw an upmixer in and call it a day kind of process?
Obviously, that's going to depend a lot on your goals. If your goal is to be Dan and to win every possible car audio competition with perfect scores, obviously you're going to need to involve physics a little bit more than the average person with an F-150 with a existing stereo install that wants to be able to add listening positions to the car, right?
So I think what he's asking basically from a design standpoint, if someone asks you for an F-150, how would you design it? As far as the front stage, what would you recommend?
Yep, and for that, I would recommend that you put the far left and right speakers, whatever you choose them to be, off axis with the listeners, so that you get a little bit of time amplitude trading going on with the installation fairly naturally, and that you install the largest center channel as is reasonable to fit in the dash.
And why is that?
The same reason that left and right is important to you now, in a car audio installation, center becomes just as important. In many cases, with most music, probably more so. If you think about the imaging of your favorite song, the probability is high that the center of the image that you have in your mind is going to contain the vocalist, probably the bass player, and behind that, probably the drummer.
Right.
All three of those instruments now need to be replicated by the speaker that's in the middle of your dash in an optimal condition. Right.
So you need basically the left quadrant, center quadrant, and right quadrant to basically be able to play the same frequency range of all.
In an optimal condition, right? But I recognize that is not possible in 90% of cars rolling off the showroom floor today, right?
Right, but I think that's an important definition in what you're attempting to do, as far as, because, I mean, let's face it, we're looking for best case scenario, not what's compromised in what you're doing. I mean, if we're going through the trouble of doing this, and let's say we have a blank slate to do it right, I'd say we go from there, because compromise is going to happen no matter what, and that's the easy part, I guess, to a certain degree. But at least when you do make those compromises, knowing what you're going to lose as a result, I think, is the important part at that point, right? Because so much of what's been done to date when it comes to people doing center channels is kind of like, I've got a 8-inch mid-bass driver over here with a 3-inch mid-range and a tweeter, and these are all optimally put. I've got mid-bass in the kick panels with everything done, and mid-range and tweeter perfectly aimed to get my frequency response and off-axis response and everything for that phantom center image and everything else. And now I'm going to try throwing an upmixer in there. So I'm going to throw, I think I can fit a 2-inch mid-range there. I'll just throw that in the dash and throw it in there and see what happens. And man, it just doesn't seem to be working very good. You know what I mean? Like, so
right.
I think,
so let's talk about that specific condition. Okay. They threw a 2-inch mid-range up there. That 2-inch mid-range probably plays down to, I don't know, let's say 500 hertz.
Right.
Right. From 500 hertz and up, the imaging will be exactly as you expect it to be. From 500 hertz and down, you now have a gap between 500 hertz and where your subwoofer is that needs to be handled by some other set of speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a setting in the SRP that allows you to divert the audio below 500 hertz to the side speakers.
Okay.
Now you have a physics problem, don't you? If you chose to install your mid bass in the doors, you have awful path length differences.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, the probability is high that the chest of your vocalist that should be in the center will be closer to you than you want it to be. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So in that circumstance, improving the path lengths by moving the mid bass from the doors to the kick panels will help. And anything that you can do to improve the phase similarity of the left mid bass and the right mid bass, so that with time delay and all pass filters, you're able to squeeze that back into the center, will improve that center image. But your center low frequency will be phantom, and your center high frequency will be physical. And so there will be a difference there that will be hard to overcome.
Yeah.
Now, if you instead had gone to a 4-inch speaker, now let's say you're able to get that down to 200 hertz. That extra octave makes a big difference.
Sure, because you're more omnidirectional.
Right. And so now you have a smaller difference where your phantom image is from 200 hertz to wherever your sub is, let's say, 80 hertz. And 200 to 80 is a much smaller gap to manage than you had with the 2-inch speaker.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to take it a step further and move it to a 6.5 in the middle, well, now that 6.5 gets down to 100 hertz. That's within an inch or so of where your subwoofer is. You have very little phantom information being diverted to the sides that isn't covered by the center, and now your imaging is going to be spot on across the dash.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that is the relationship between the center image, the physical center image provided by the speaker in the center of the car, and the phantom center image provided by the left and right mid bass, right? But the center channel doesn't have to be all co-located on top of the dash either. Our side mid bass aren't co-located with our mid ranges on top of the dash in most cars.
Right.
And our ears being on the sides of our head means that we can drop that speaker down into a cavity that might exist in the center forward center console, anywhere in that area, and you can time align it into a coherent image. So you were going to say?
I was going to ask pretty much what you kind of answered. So let's say I've got a, mid-tweet off-axis in the pillars, like you said, and they're just firing at each other straight across. And then if I add that center, obviously most of the time that center would be flat on the dash firing up into the windshield. Is that fine? I mean, is that what you're expecting, or?
Absolutely what I'm expecting. Obviously, the processor doesn't correct the car. And so you have every opportunity to create solutions or problems with your speaker location and aiming. Every car will have a different set of optimal conditions. So if the car is particularly narrow, you may find that left and right speaker wants to be aimed at the opposite listener. You may find that if your windshield is raked back very deep like a sports car, you may find that tilting that speaker up to prevent slapback echo reflections that cause acoustical problems may be to your benefit, right? So there are a number of physical problems with the car that come along with this that still need to be considered and solved as part of the installation and tuning processes that are not covered by what the SRP does with the signal itself. It takes a stereo signal input. It provides 3 outputs, and those 3 outputs, once sent to your DSP, need to be managed as part of the installation in order to provide an appropriate presentation.
And that was actually going to be my next question, was where does this thing go? So you're essentially going from the source into this, and then this is providing an additional set of inputs to your DSP, and then you're breaking things up from there.
Yep. So if you have a one-seat car today, you plug this between your head unit and your source DSP. That system DSP that has been managing your system up to now will now manage your center channel as well for crossovers and EQ and time delay. And so it's meant to be added into an existing system or developed as part of a new system in a way very similar to what you would experience with left or right.
So Clifton, to expand on that a little bit more, basically the output is a left right center into the amp into the DSP, and then you map the channels accordingly.
Sure.
When you're doing the left right time alignment, you're not doing cross time alignment. You're doing left time alignment basically and right time alignment to the left seat and to the right seat. So basically the time alignment from the tweet to the mid bass on the left side is basically you're aligning those three drivers vertically, and you're aligning the right seat vertically too. There's no cross time alignment. That's all done by the
levels.
The levels basically are all centered. Everything in regards to what's being done in regards to imaging and staging is all done by the SRP before it goes into the DSP.
So what?
Right.
So you mentioned as far as being able to kind of divert your frequencies from the center image. What other controls do you have within the SRP before it gets to the DSP?
There are really only 3 controls because no other control is necessary. It does what it does mathematically perfectly. Not to sound funny about it, but
I didn't believe him basically initially, but
so what the controls are the transition frequency enable. So if that's turned off, you get 3 full range channels from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Left, center, and right would all be full range. Most cars aren't going to have that, but if I go to demo an upmixer on a set of like 3 self-powered JBLs, I turn that off and all 3 channels are full range. So you get the full experience. I then turn that on and set the center transition frequency to around 100 hertz. And so the second setting is the frequency at which that occurs. And so that runs from like 45 hertz up to 400 hertz, which gives a fairly broad opportunity for change in the center channel. If you have a center channel that can't make it down to about 400 hertz, you probably want to reconsider your center channel selection. So I think most 3-inch and 4-inch drivers should be able to handle that without any difficulty.
Sure, absolutely.
The last is center focus, that actually undoes the perfect math a little bit in order to provide the center channel a little bit less perfect information and divert a little bit of that information, and I mean a very little bit, to the sides. And that can, in cars with very, very good path lengths, help provide a more stereo-like presentation from both seats. So the physical nature of the center channel can be basically wiped clean in the image, and the entire stage sounds the same from far left to far right.
So you're kind of like
detuning things.
I was going to say it's kind of like if somebody in a traditional left-right phantom center scenario, if you have everything phase coherent and perfectly timed and everything else, and somebody's like, well, I want a bigger image, and you're like, well, okay, well, I'll undo the phase a little bit, I guess,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know of another, maybe you guys know of a better way to do that. Like, I don't know another way to make things a bigger image without like doing it wrong in my mind, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And that's the thing. In order to meet a preference, sometimes you have to detune things very slightly so that it seems more real, because it can truly become hyper-focused, right? The other thing is that a physical center channel does away with a lot of problems that we've ignored with stereo for a very long time. A stereo phantom center doesn't have the same tonality as far left and far right.
Correct.
there are physiological reasons for that.
For sure.
And those reasons go away when you have a physical center channel that no longer experiences the comb filtering that the head and body impose upon the reception of a stereo signal, right? And so what you end up with is a level of precision of tonality and spatial representation that's not the usual. It's not something you're accustomed to with a stereo image. And
Right.
so by detuning that a little bit and some use of EQ, you can replicate the sensation of the tonality experienced with a phantom center using a real center.
Mm.
Yeah, the other peculiar thing, and I touched on it earlier, is, for example, Clifton, if you got in my car, basically, being that you're tall and have a big head,
Thanks.
I couldn't. I'm sorry. This stuff just seems to be casual conversation.
Most of my big head is on the inside of my brain, not on the outside. But yeah.
Well, you have had to have a large cavity to handle all that. And if I were to put you in the car and then Linda from California car, there's a huge height and difference there, right?
For sure.
So I would have to basically try to get you down lower and try to get her up higher, right?
Right.
Not with this. And I've even basically gone so far as to raise my seat up and down, slunch down in the seat, and then boost myself up where my head's hitting the ceiling to see if I could hear a difference. And it stays the same.
Yeah. Side to side, front to back.
Side to side, front to back. Doesn't change anything. And I've had a lot of people ask me, they're like, well, have you popped it open to basically see what's inside? Yes. Will you show me a picture? No, nothing to see there. I mean, it's really not anything that's overly complicated. So the magic is in what he's done with the code
Math
and the math inside. That's where the magic has occurred, basically. And I think that's with any processor.
And along those lines, if you are interested in seeing what's inside these things, I posted pictures of the build process up on Facebook on the Riven Audio page. So, nothing hidden. That's what's in the box.
Right.
Yeah. No, I didn't want to share it because it wasn't mine to share. So and I don't think Todd saw that. I'm like, well, here you go. Here, this is all it is, and nothing too complicated. And it just does its thing.
So obviously you've had a lot of iterations to get to this point. Where do you want to go with it from here? What do you feel like are there next steps? Is it there? Where are you at in the process?
I think right now where the software is and the hardware is, I am very, very happy. There are areas of optimization that I'm continually working on that may lead to better down the road. But I think where we are right now is some place that I don't think any of us have ever experienced. And I have some ideas on how to make it better to better fit people's expectations and car audio in general. And as that becomes possible, I'll talk more about it.
This is the first you and I have really talked about this, Todd.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of what people have to say. It kind of goes through one ear and out the other. But I think people have heard similar where, certain people have tried using the product. They've had issues with it, or they've had issues getting it to do what they think it should be doing, meeting those expectations, things like that.
Absolutely.
There doesn't need to be any specifics as far as people go or anything like that, but what do you find has been the typical misalignment or alignment to get things the way they should be there in terms of, what have the core issues been there in reality and how are they solved?
Can I speak on my experience?
Yeah.
Before you tell the global, Todd?
Yeah.
To explain the experience that Jeffrey and I went through, I think we were overcomplicating the process. When we plugged it up, we were like, oh, we need to do this, oh, we need to do that, oh, we need to level adjust this and level adjust, and we were just really overcomplicating it. If we would have just plugged it up and left it alone for a minute, basically, we would have been a lot better off. So I can kind of tell you what I did basically once I sat and thought about it for a minute. It was as simple as I took an SPL meter out and I played pink noise on the left side of the vehicle. All right, I got a reference. All right, there's 80 dB. Played pink noise on the right side of the vehicle. Got 80 dB. Played pink noise in the center of the vehicle, 80 dB, and then basically turned it on, and it was like magic. It was that simple.
That's it.
I think sometimes people have a tendency to overcomplicate, and they want to have something that they program that they log into, and they start fiddling with stuff and messing with stuff and doing sliders and doing crossover points and all this kind of stuff. Nah, you don't gotta do it. Plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'll let Todd.
Yeah, Dr. Winker just had his truck fitted with one. And the first thing that he said when he reached out to me afterwards was, this is too easy. We set levels the same, left, center, and right. I delayed the center, he says, onto the IEC circle. So basically, he just had the same delay from the middle of the car to the left, center, and right, and then listened to music and was blown away. That is essentially it. If your path lanes are particularly off, there may be a little bit more delay work that needs to happen, but more or less, that's all there is to it. The number one thing that I get is people measuring it with pink noise. Instead of using the pink noise that's downloadable from the website, they instead use stereo pink noise. And they expect that feeding stereo pink noise should give them left, center, and right. And that is patently not true, right? What you actually get...
You're using correlated through it then? Just
yeah, if you're using correlated pink noise through it, then stereo pink noise will give you a wonderful center image. And if it's not perfectly correlated, you'll get just a little bit of fuzz out of the left and the right. Mm-hmm. And so if you're measuring that and expecting to get a left full range signal, what you're going to get is just a little bit of fuzz. The difference between the amplitude and phase of the pink noise in the left channel and the right channel. This is a very sensitive device. Mm-hmm. And it has to be in order to properly relocate the music energy to the appropriate speaker. And it will happily do that with not perfectly correlated pink noise too. And so in order to measure the left channel, you need to use left pink noise or disconnect the right input to the processor, right? You can't just go and mute center and right in your system DSP because now you've muted the center channel where all of the information actually is, the right channel where there's a little bit of fuzz, and all you get is a little bit of fuzz out of the left speaker, and people freak out. That is operating as designed. It's supposed to do that. So if you find yourself in that circumstance where you get a little bit of fuzz and some sub bass, then you're probably using stereo pink noise as an input instead of using left stereo and right pink noise.
I gotcha.
And so that's the number one thing. If you want to measure the left channel, feed it left channel only information. Otherwise, it's going to steer it somewhere else.
That makes sense.
So me being hard-headed.
No,
that's right. When we first fired this up, we didn't read the directions.
No,
that's correct. So it's kind of like you get something from IKEA, basically, and you're trying to put it together, and you're like, oh shit, I can do this. Well, I got some tools here.
So you put garbage in, you got garbage out.
That's correct. That's correct. So it took us a minute, and then I had some conversations, and Jeffrey had some conversations with Todd, and now it's
like, you dumbasses. You just.
No, he's very nice. Basically, he's never.
I'll say it for him.
Yeah, I haven't said that out loud yet.
You were saying it, just not out loud.
I could feel it through the phone. Like, y'all are making it so much more difficult than it needs to be.
Hey, I've been on the receiving end of Todd's side eye. I know exactly what that sounds like, even if he's not making a noise.
Right.
Yeah.
And but we got it sorted out, and I can tell you it's not even close to being as good as it's going to be. I think it's going to be. I think eventually that, at least in my car, that I will use the up mixer exclusively for everything I'm getting judged on, with the exception of maybe a money round, and I am not sure about that yet. Because it's very, very precise in what it does.
Yeah, if your car is set up right, you should be able to take a 2-seat tune and 1-seat it without any problems.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, I know there was a competitor recently that went to one of the Texas shows with a Riven and a very basic setup with a 6 in each door, a 4-tweet left, 4-tweet center, 4-tweet right. And when I say a basic setup, I mean he had a single sub and a prefab-ish box, basically on a 5-channel amp.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty basic, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a truck, and scored a 209 at one of the recent IASCA shows in Dallas, in Texas, which is a pretty good score.
Yeah.
And I think it shocked a lot of people. Like, oh, so it's no joke. It's kind of made me stop and go, kind of scratch my chin a little bit. Like, huh. So, and that's hard to do in my old age. I'm just nothing really excites me anymore unless it's blonde and blonde and round.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that I'm enjoying the most is watching people like Pate and Mark and others get excited about car audio again, because it's what they've always wanted and never had, and it is so cool to be able to give them that kind of joy again. I mean, they have been doing this a long time. They are as jaded as you're gonna get, and to make them smile and giggle about it is just awesome. So,
no, for sure. Well, and I mean, I think up until now with what you're doing, Tom's probably the only one that was really playing the 2-seat game in the 2-seat world, because everybody else,
he had a distinct advantage. Yes, sir.
Because everybody else, myself included, I mean, I competed 2-seat, but I competed 2-seat with a 1-seat tune because you just played the math on the score sheet and you came out better because you didn't have a compromise there. Yep. But now, I mean, it seems now, and obviously this is probably more of a question for Natan, but how does this contrast with what he's doing? I assume he's doing more of a typical surround upmixing type of thing, or do you know?
He does more of a surround upmixing, but he has done an extraordinary job of taking that surround upmixer and presenting it in a stereo-like 2-seat way.
Yeah, agreed.
Natan's car is awesome, and there's just no two ways about it. And he has a head start on everyone who's hoping to head down his path and take him out, right? Because he has experience, right? We look at our experience and it's all with 1-seat cars. It's tuning for that one point in space that is perfect. And it's going to take some time for people to understand the acoustics of the car from a new perspective and system design from a new perspective that harkens back to what the old school cars used to do, that they took the time to understand the environment and they took the time to develop installation techniques that optimize path lengths. And those things are still going to rule the top of the roost. There's just no two ways about it. But nowadays, when you can combine physics with the electronics that truly do the job, you're going to have some really extraordinary cars. And I'm looking forward to that from the competition perspective, to see what people do with it there. But the meat of this is everybody's daily driven car, right? The car that you spend your time in with your wife and kids and whomever else you happen to be toting along, and they don't have to suffer in silence anymore listening to the bad seat, right? They all get a good seat, and that's a huge change. The opportunity to be able to do that using a factory installed left and right in the doors, right? Because those are off axis. And in those doors, you can usually fit a nice mid bass, and many of them are coming with options for mid ranges as well nowadays, and a factory center channel location. And from that, you can extract a really nice 2-seat presentation. Is it a competition ready? No, but
right.
But what it will do basically is it will bring a much nicer presentation to the masses. And some shops that struggle more with tuning, they can set some basic crossover points, some basic EQ points on a DSP and put this in front of it, and it will do so much of the heavy lifting for people basically in a very short period of time, and dramatically just improve the product that shops are able to deliver to customers. I don't know about, did I say that right, Todd?
Yeah, you did.
I imagine just not having to concentrate so hard on left to right phasing issues is probably huge, right? I mean,
yeah, and certainly the car still has a say in all of this. Sure. And cars with, particularly large center consoles will always have mid-bass phase problems, right? Mm-hmm. It just is what it is. And so that will remain a challenge. I think a lot of cars have space that has never been considered for installations before because nobody's ever had a reason to. But I think there's an opportunity now for that to change and for a whole car presentation to be offered as an alternative to just one good seat and bass.
Sure.
Yeah, using your van as an example, Clifton. If I know you've got a center mounted mid bass in your vehicle, if you were to basically just take the system you have right now and add another 7 tweet
to the center
in the center area of your car, and add the ribbon, and all of a sudden it would be like, your imaging would be spectacular, and from both seats.
Mm-hmm.
And, being able to relax in your seat as you please and not have it change is a really nice experience.
If you want to lean your seat way back behind the B pillar and cruise down the road like you like to do, then that's not a problem.
Man, calling out my gangsta all of a sudden.
Look, I'm not mad at you.
Is there anything else we need to cover on this? Because I mean, like I said, I'm as new to it as most people probably listening right now, but so I guess I don't know all the right questions to ask here. But if there's something else that needs, it feels like we covered most of it, but if there's something else that we need to, is there anything else there?
No, I think that's about it. If your goal with something like this is a perfect 2-seat presentation, that'll take some work, but it is certainly possible to achieve now. If your goal is not just one seat that sounds good in a car, boy, that has become really, really easy. Mm-hmm. And I'm easy to reach and often available, and I respond to emails pretty quickly. So if you have questions about it, please reach out to me. If there was anything that we didn't cover in this discussion, I'm more than happy to work through it with you.
And how do they find the product? As far as I think you said, do you have a website, right? What's that?
Yep, rivenaudio.com.
That's RIVEN audio?
That is correct.
All right, cool. Awesome.
So I got a question for you, Clifton.
What's that?
So I've heard a lot of you've had a lot of podcasts recently on the on some of the remote tuning and tuning services and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which I've kind of been conflicted about what I've heard as far as
conflicted.
Yeah, conflicted. I mean I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what. If you're feeling the tuning services, from the different companies that are offering, or if you're liking it, if you're not liking it, if you think it's a benefit to the industry, what's your general thoughts on it?
I focused myself mainly on Jeffrey with Total Tuning and Miguel with forgot the name of his company right now.
Waveform.
Waveform,
Yeah.
Waveform Tuning.
And Nick Apicella.
I didn't focus on Nick so much just because he's not really focused on it.
I got you.
And that was my main thing with like Jeffrey and Miguel, is both of them I feel like are approaching it from a standpoint that nobody else has in terms of process and business, because there have been plenty of tuners out there, but they typically own a shop, or it's like, hey, they know because you got your stuff installed there, then they help you out. Your Steve Cooks, your Michael Myers, your Scott Welch's, your even Mark Eldridge, whoever else, like they're going to be most interested in tuning a system that they did. They're also not going to do that where you are. You're going to be driving to Alabama or California or wherever they are to do that, And
you're not gonna get a service where you basically get a turnaround time of 2 or 3 hours either. You have to you have to leave your car.
Exactly. Yeah, and some of those guys, I mean, it's a month. You drop off your car and it's going to be in their garage for a month and come back later. And I mean, I think if you're really going for that competition level tune, that is all still valid.
Agreed.
Nobody in a day, I don't care who they are, is going to get there in a day. Taking that into consideration. To contrast, I think the process is not so much the results, because I mean the results are going to be vary regardless, and especially my van is a curveball of curveballs, so I don't expect anybody to be able to take that much of anywhere. But I think that curveball and the process is all kind of all part of it in my scenario. I think to take those two services, if I was in full control of what both Jeffrey is doing and what Miguel is doing, and they were both, let's say, working for me, and I was dividing and conquering that in a way that I thought would be most beneficial overall to everybody involved, I would say that Jeffrey has much more of a process and a ability to, for lack of a better word, industrialize it. In particular for shops, for retailers, for installers, for anybody who they still need to have an ear, they still need to be able to give feedback, but who maybe don't want to keep up with all the technicalities or get that muscle memory, because it really requires repetitive goings on to really get that part down and the tuning process down. And to be able to, hey, here I set the mic, go do it. I'm going to go work on this over here. Let me know when you need me. Okay, come back, do it. I mean, the ability for a shop to not have to have a dedicated tuner or spend years of their life trying to figure it out, it's an easy button for shops that should not be overlooked. It's one of those things where, hey, even if they buy their own Macs, if they're doing
set it up, log it in.
Yep, have a steady level of installs going, and Jeffrey is your man for that, 100%.
Yep.
And I think if and when the shops in the industry grasp onto that and utilize him in particular for doing this, because I think he is absolutely built for that in a way that probably nobody else can do better. So in that regard, I think, especially at the retail level, getting cars consistently out there that are better than they ever would be any other way, and in a technically correct way and everything else, that's really where I think he can go really far in this, and the industry can go far because of it.
And he's got a long reach because he's not having to travel, and that's
absolutely. He can bust out 10 tunes in a weekend if there's multiple, if a shop has multiple cars or whatever, like.
Yep. And it's going to be, and in my opinion, having heard a lot of them, because he's done 500 and some odd tunes now basically, and I've heard various iterations of them basically over the last few years. Are they competition ready? Nah. Basically, maybe at a local show, but even. But
what he's doing is still way beyond what most shops are ever putting out.
It'll be happy for most people. I won't say 98% of the people basically will be absolutely thrilled with the end results.
Right. Absolutely.
Versus how many times you've seen a shop charge someone 20 grand for a system, but they can't tune it, and the customer is left with a bad taste in their mouth because they don't know what the potential of the equipment is.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of potential there. And again, I stress the shops because they'll get in a muscle memory of doing the setup and giving the feedback and having that language. And Jeffrey already has the tuning part down. So it's bar none a great way to do there. For the guys who are enthusiasts, and I know that are more wanting to learn or be part of the process or not be part of the process, or just, hey, I'm excited to be involved and are maybe even new to competition or dabbling into competition and just need to get up to that next level, but don't necessarily know what to do next and don't have that relationship with a dedicated tuner or can't travel to that tuner or whatever and want to get to that next level and really have the, again, I focus on the process. Miguel is the guy. Yep. His personality is outstanding for doing this work. Me, as on the receiving end working with him, I felt like a VIP, not just a part of the process. He brings a lot to the table in the way he approaches it. And because he's there in person, not relying on a back and forth in terms of getting it beyond what the tools are able to do, he's definitely able to get it further along in the process just because he's able to see what's happening, take a listen to it, make changes, take the time with the customer going, what do you want? How do you want to take it? But he's there. That shortens that process.
Say less about that because if I'll give you an example. Like we kind of did a little science experiment with my car for finals. We basically did what the process would be if we would have done a remote tune. There was very little, a little bit, but a very little seat time done when we took the car to finals. And if not for anything more, basically it was strictly because of time constraints. The car was only done 8 days before finals, and we just didn't have time to put a lot of seat time in it. Now that I've had times to sit in it and listen to it, there's been a number of slight changes. I say nothing major, but these little slight changes add up, and it's significantly better now. And then of course Jeffrey's gonna come up. We're gonna run the Max back through it again before Aggie Land because he wants to see what he did relative to what I changed.
Right.
And then basically kind of figure out the where's the happy medium between the two.
Right.
But yeah, you're exactly right. A quality tuner in person, I think, basically can do probably a better job than a remote tuner some of the time.
For myself, even though I understand the process of tuning, I don't really like doing it on my own vehicle. I've never charged for it. Like, it's one of those things where, hey, I was a landscaper too, and I really know how to cut grass. I don't really like to mow the lawn. To me, it's, I know a lot of people love doing it, and to me, it's kind of like, okay, have at it, and my order is, I think, a fairly logical order in that Jeffrey's tune, and I'm going to throw Pate under the bus here, or whoever tuned my van at Mobile Toys, but Jeffrey's tune was absolutely better than what I got from the shop.
I remember you telling me you didn't mind the original tune from the shop.
I didn't. I'm not saying that the original tune was terrible, but I mean, it was a basic, very basic tune.
Yep.
And Jeffrey's tune was better than that, and Miguel's tune was better than Jeffrey's. But if I went over to Michael Myers and spent a few days, or if I went to Steve Cook, or I went to Scott Welch, or
if you went to MTI in person.
Right. Yes. Or if I gave it to Jeffrey for a week and said, here, knock yourself out. I mean, I'm not saying that any of these people can or cannot do a certain level of work. It's just a matter of there's constraints and compromises that's involved in what's happening, and that can't be overlooked. And I think Jeffrey has never claimed that he's spitting out a competition finish level tune doing it remotely.
No, he's trying to add value and help the masses,
right?
Wherever they may be,
And I think both of them are doing a huge service there in the fact that Miguel's coming to the people in his way, Jeffrey's coming to people in his way.
Yep.
Miguel's is a little more VIP in a way that other people can't do, and
he'll leave a mint on your pillow for you. Basically.
Exactly.
I get it.
Sitting here as somebody on the receiving end of either one, I would take the time and pay for Miguel to do that, because it was a more enjoyable process for me to do that, because I was able to jump in on the parts that mattered and let it go on the other parts. I didn't have to think about how to set up mics or set up computers. Just there's the vehicle, have at it. So yeah, but again, that's not to discredit Jeffrey on any way, shape, or form. They both have plenty of room in the market to attack it, because again, they're the only ones out there doing it.
I get people sometimes basically like, hey, you had a tune maybe. And they're like, well, you want to come help me tune? Goes, here's Jeffrey, 1-8-9-4-3. Call him.
Exactly. Well, and I'm in the same boat.
I'm sure Todd the same way.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Yeah. Again, my van being peculiar has definitely shown the limitations of the measurement tools in question. So it's one of those things where if you have, I think there's certain levels of systems out there that, if they're not as straightforward, might run into issues where if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't have somebody on hand to kind of work through those to kind of counter beyond, because things are happening that the tools, the measurement tools aren't necessarily
that center and mid bass thrown for a loop.
Well, it's more I would say the biggest issue in that vehicle is with the mid and tweet being so far off axis, and the mid being so large, and the crossover point needing to be so high. Like, there's so much beaming happening from the mid, and the polar response being so much different between the mid and tweet to left and right, that the Max kind of just doesn't know what to do with all that.
Just like, oh, what the hell? Yeah, you have to almost go in there by ear and and figure it out.
Because even when Miguel did it, like, he had put an all pass. He even said it like in the podcast interview, like he put an all pass filter in, making to make part of the all the squiggly lines on the Max look right, and then he got in and it was like, nope, that's not it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where, to circle back around to what Todd has going here, like, for all the issues that my van has because of peculiarities in the install, throwing it, like what you said, Dan, throwing another 7 tweet in the dash and adding this in would absolutely be the fix for that.
Oh, so, no, without a doubt. But just based on what you described to me, it was sort out, and I don't know how. So don't ask me. In the future, call Todd. He'll tell you. But I don't know the math behind it.
But it just does it. It's magic. We finally found the magic black box to put in cars. We got it.
It's packaged that way for a reason.
I assure you that I would not endorse it. Basically, if I really legitimately didn't go, literally scratch my chin and go, what kind of black magic voodoo bullshit is this? Hey, how was this at? Let me see that laptop, Jeffrey said. Hand me the laptop and look at it. I'm like, yeah, this don't make any sense.
People are always going to be skeptical of that, but hopefully we can change some minds this coming competition season, especially with more people kind of having to do 2-seat in that. I assume that we're going to see an uptick on people trying to figure out what to do there, which helps everybody in the long run. So
yeah, we're going to see some people basically using this for 1 seat, basically, which is what you're going to see. Basically, that just needs some help on getting their imaging right and their staging right, basically, and you're going to see them figuring out this is an advantage to use this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost to that point.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And there have been a couple of other upmixers that have hit the market lately. And I think there's room for all of them because they all approach the problem differently and all provide slightly different results. So, I can see a lot of room for preference there, that a lot of people like surround and would lean in that direction. Just so happens that I didn't. And there are a couple of people that seem to agree that this suits them better. So I really look forward to seeing how all of the products on the market lead to a change in how we approach building cars and tuning cars and the expectations that we have when we sit in them, whatever seat that is.
Right.
I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to seeing how all of this changes the face of the way the industry works. Because I really do think it will.
Yeah. If people apply it right and it does what it's supposed to do and everything else, like it's definitely one of the larger paradigm shifts that we potentially will see over time, is similar to when we got the DSPs to the level of where they got to be, in the past 10 to 15 years, to where, because obviously having the power of having a computer controlled DSP in our hands about the time Todd and I both came back on the scene, in that 2012, 2013 range, like, that was a big difference from when I was last on the scene 10 years before.
Yeah. A DSP, what's that?
Yeah, we had them in Pro Audio, and I used them there, but I never really thought about it. It was like time delay. What? And it having the power of the DSPs in everybody's hands, and then using smaller format mid ranges and doing all that changed the face of what we expected on imaging, for example. I mean, we went from the big images and everything else that people talk about to having things that are actually more like what you would hear in a studio or in a really well set up, home audio system.
But not live.
Well, no, but that's not what we're reproducing.
What do we always talk about, basically? And we're trying to recreate a live performance.
Well, that'd be great if those people were actually sitting on top of my dash. But until then, this thing went through a thing called a microphone. So,
all right, fair enough. I was starting to dive down another rabbit hole on you, but since we're an hour and 40 minutes in, I won't do that.
I'm more than willing to go down that rabbit hole with you. I'll tell you that right now. But yeah, we don't have a height and depth switch on the mixer board when you're actually recording this stuff. So anything else is just ends up being anomalies. But I really do think that this potentially has the ability to have that much more effect going forward. And Todd, on a personal level, I mean, I'm really appreciative of you putting your time and effort into this, because I know you're never going to make back from it what you put into it. And I know you don't need this for your livelihood or income or anything else. I mean, it's really something that you have taken what you learned and developed with your time in car audio and have injected that 100-fold back into the community. And I know, like you said earlier, alluded to earlier, the excitement level of certain people in the industry has definitely skyrocketed since you did this, like I've seen from very few others. So thank you for doing that for the community, and I really hope the best for this in the long run.
Awesome. Thank you. That really means a lot. Thanks, Cliff.
Dan, anything else you want to argue about?
No.
Okay.
Yes, but no, not tonight. Not tonight.
Make a list. We'll do it another time.
All right, right on.
Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, man.
How about the ones we especially like?
Which ones?
The ones with the cars that go.
I hear you. Hit it.